I was working behind the counter at our auto parts store when a man in a suit came up to me and showed me some official identification. Then he asked if I was Bill Evans. "Why don't you show me your ID a little slower?" I asked politely. It was a little fast. The guy frowned, pulled his wallet out of his pocket again, and laid out several impressive-looking IDs. I read them all carefully before snapping a picture with my phone. "I don't think you can do that," he protested. "You saw me do it, didn't you?" I asked, smirking slightly. "Hell yes, I did. You just took a picture of my ID. How do I know what you're going to do with it?" he asked with some concern. "One thing at a time," I replied. "I can do it. You've seen it happen. What do most people do with a photo of a police detective's ID card? Maybe use it to memorize his name and badge number in case the shit hits the fan? You're acting suspicious as hell for a guy who hasn't been charged with anything," replied the man I now knew as Detective Sampson. "You're being suspicious as hell for a detective who's never accused me of any wrongdoing," I countered. "I've lived around cops all my life. I had a healthy respect for the good ones and a complete contempt for the less professional ones. My cousin Joe was a good cop. He was the one who told me to always take a photo of any ID from anyone who saw fit to show it. He told me that many plainclothes people try to be largely anonymous when they're trying to ruin your life." "Where were you last night at midnight?" The man demanded an answer. The customer behind him in line was watching intently. I didn't know what the detective was looking for, but I was sure it would be better to deal with it alone. I called Jeff to step behind the counter for a few minutes. "Come into my office and we'll discuss this without an audience," I instructed the detective, who was clearly losing patience. Once we were settled in my office, he started asking questions again. "Where were you last night at midnight? If you come into my store one more time and shout accusations and questions so that my customers and employees can hear you, I will throw you out the door. Try to act like a professional," I admonished. "You can't throw me out. I'm a police detective," he insisted. "Do you have a warrant?" I demanded it. "No, I'm here to ask you a few questions," he said, but with less rudeness. "That's why I suggested we come back here to my office. You have the right to ask questions, and I have the right to kick your ass off my property." "I'm willing to talk to you, but there's no reason to involve my clients," I explained before answering his question. "I was home all night. I left work yesterday at 4 o'clock and was home by 4:30. I never left the house again," I assured Sampson. "Can anyone corroborate your statement?" the detective asked. "Well, my daughter and my wife were home with me all night, so I'd say they'd both be more than willing to vouch for my whereabouts," I reasoned. "Your wife said you slept on the couch last night. You could have gone out for a few hours and come home without anyone knowing you were gone," Detective Sampson said. "Have you talked to my wife yet?" I asked in surprise. "Did she tell you I slept on the couch last night?" "How well did you know Barry Lassiter?" was his next question. "I'd never heard of the guy. I don't think I ever met him," I answered. "He might have bought some parts from us, but I don't know his name." "Do you know where he lived?" Sampson continued. "I noticed that your questions refer to him in the past tense. If I didn't know the guy, then I have no idea where he lived," I suggested. "Is there any reason I should have known?" "Did your wife ever mention him? Did you ever see any emails or texts he sent to your wife?" "You seem to have a way of asking the same question in different words. I guess when I say I've never heard the name, you can assume that also means I've never read his messages, felt him, or even smelled him," I replied. "I do, however, smell a rat. Why are you asking me about this guy? He was beaten to death last night. At this point, you are a person of interest in the investigation. Would you like to change your story?" Sampson asked. "Wow, you've cleverly slipped that question in," I replied with feigned awe. "Why would I kill a guy I never knew, never met, never heard of?" "Some husbands get furious when they find out their wives are having an affair. They even get violent and lash out at her lover," Sampson replied, watching my reaction carefully. "Are you telling me that Mary slept with that dead asshole?" I angrily demanded an answer. "Son of a bitch, how long has this been going on?" "Your wife claims only 2 months," the detective replied. "How long have you known or suspected?" "About 1 minute, asshole!" I yelled at the stupid bastard. "This interview is over. I have to go home and talk to my wife." "That's not possible," Detective Sampson informed me. There's a restraining order that keeps you at least 100 yards away from her. You can't go home. She's worried you're gonna hurt her. She told us you have a bad temper. If you found out about her affair with Mr. Lassiter, she thinks you might be angry enough to kill him, Sampson said, studying his notes. Both she and your daughter think it's best to seek a restraining order to protect yourself. Mary said that? I asked, leaning back in my chair. Not only is she cheating on me, but she told the police that I am capable of killing her lover? Is she afraid of me now? Is Cindy afraid of me too? All I ever did was love them both. I've always been close to my daughter. I thought Mary and I had a good marriage. Now you're telling me they're both afraid of me? They think I might be a killer? Is there any information you can give me to make me believe that you didn't kill your wife's lover? Sampson asked. The fact that I didn't know this guy and didn't even realize Mary had a lover should be a pretty huge clue, I offered. We'll question you again, Evans. We'll follow every lead to find and convict the man responsible for this crime. In the meantime, don't leave town. Holy shit, Marshal Dillon. You think you have the right to tell me I have to stay in Blandon until you give me permission to leave? You just told me Mary has a restraining order against me. You can arrest me if I come within a few hundred feet of her at any time. Here's my card. I'll go anywhere I want to go just to be away from here. I'll be a phone call away if you need me, I replied, holding out my business card to him. I just told you not to leave town, growled the detective. I mentioned you to Mayor Smith this morning. The thought of putting you in jail for the next 20 years seemed appealing to him. You can't fight City Hall, asshole. I supported Ben Rogers for mayor when he ran against Smith. That's no reason to put me in jail, I protested. You made some remarks wondering how Mayor Smith could have such strong support for a small-town mayor. You told voters you wondered what he had done to garner that kind of support, Sampson recalled. He didn't appreciate your insinuation. If you leave town, I'll have the mayor's support when I drag your sorry ass back to court. Fuck you, I yelled back. This is still America, and no bipedal flatfoot is going to tell me what I can or can't do. It was the first time I'd ever used the term flatfoot, but it felt right. I was having a very hard time digesting all the information I had just received, and I was in no mood to forgive. Get out of here before I call the real cops, asshole, I shouted, opening the office door. How I tried so hard to hide my personal problems from employees and clients. Detective Sampson walked out of my office with a smirk on his face. At that moment, I realized that he would do everything he could to prove me guilty of murder. My brother Dennis appeared from around the corner, walked into my office, closed the door, and sat down. What just happened? He asked quietly. I quickly recounted the gist of my encounter with Detective Sampson. I finished my version of events by repeating how the bastard told me not to leave town and how he even mentioned that Mayor Smith wanted to put me away. So, where are you going to go? Dennis asked. You can't stay here. That asshole will be after you, and I don't want to think what might happen if you run into Mary. It'll probably result in jail time for you. I was thinking the same thing. Thanks for looking at things from my side, I replied. I'll just get in my truck and start driving. I hope they find the upstanding citizen who beat the creep who stole my wife to death. If he can't pay for a lawyer, I'll help him find a good one. I owe that guy. Don't even think about going home, Dennis suggested. Just start driving. Use your business card to buy whatever you need. Take your laptop so I can keep you up to date on everything. I'll keep you updated on any developments here. Stay safe and keep your nose clean. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was driving south on Highway 81. As I drove, I thought about how drastically my life had changed in a very short time. The night before, Mary and I had gotten into an argument about sex. More specifically, it was the lack of sex that had me agitated. For weeks, Mary had been aloof and cold toward me, and I was tired of it. Throughout our marriage, we had always made time a couple times a week to make love, but not lately. Last night, she turned me down again. I wasn't surprised, but I was angry. I told her that if something was wrong, she should tell me. I couldn't fix the situation if I didn't know what was wrong. She accused me of being selfish and not taking her feelings into consideration. Just because I want to get turned on doesn't mean she has to lay down and spread her legs for me. She told me that she needs romance and courtship to make her feel wanted and loved. Then I went to sleep on the couch. Now I knew why she wasn't interested in sex with me. She was getting everything she wanted elsewhere, and I was out of the picture. Just the thought of her shutting me out while she was getting all the sex she could made me even angrier. What a bitch. The next afternoon, I found myself in western Tennessee. I stopped at a small park in some backwater town to walk around a bit and relieve the stiffness in my legs and back. I'd only been walking for a few minutes when I noticed an unkempt-looking guy heading toward me. I always thought I could handle myself, so I wasn't too worried about him. He then pulled out a gun and pointed it at my chest. "I want you to come with me," was all he said, nodding toward the old Ford Explorer. When we got to it, he opened the passenger door and invited me inside. Once I was seated and buckled in, the guy was obviously concerned about safety. He quickly walked around the car and got behind the wheel. "Get that bag out of the back seat and put on what's in it," he ordered. I waited for an opportunity to grab the gun out of his hand, but he didn't give me one. He looked ungroomed, but he seemed to know what he was doing. I grabbed my bag and pulled out what turned out to be a long lab coat, along with a floppy hat, latex gloves, and a pair of dark sunglasses. The guy pulled over and parked by an abandoned sawmill. He made me unbuckle my seatbelt and put on a robe. By the time I buttoned it up and put on my hat, glasses, and gloves, he was dressed identically. "Let me guess. We're going to a masquerade party dressed as the Blues Brothers?" I joked nervously, hoping the guy would open up. He only snorted and indicated for me to fasten my seatbelt. I got a bad feeling when he pulled into the bank's parking lot 5 minutes later. He gestured for me to sit still. He got out of the SUV and walked over to open my door. When he did, he handed me a cloth bag. "You're going to hold it open while I stuff money in there," was all he said. I was about to suggest he reconsider his not-so-well-thought-out plan when he put the gun to my forehead and nodded toward the bank. Surprisingly, it took the two tellers a very long time to notice that something was wrong. Their smiles finally evaporated when my captor pointed his gun at them. "Put all the money in the bag this bastard is holding," he demanded, in a tone that showed he didn't consider me an equal partner. The tellers struggled to get the money into the bag because they couldn't get their hands under the thick acrylic panel the bank had installed for their safety. After struggling for half a minute or so, they just started slipping the money under the panel while I swept it into the bag. The bag was almost full when the faint sounds of howling sirens in the distance reached the financial institution. The approaching howl of the sirens filled me with a fear that almost made me manacled my shorts. "God damn it!" yelled my fellow thief. "I told you bitches not to set off the alarm!" Uttering this profanity, he pointed his gun at the cashier, a big busted redhead, and pulled the trigger. His hat suddenly flew off his head, and he staggered backward. I noticed blood quickly begin to trickle down his left eye. He shook his head a few times and raised his gun toward the other cashier, a blonde with a smaller bust but a gorgeous smile. As he pointed the gun, I glanced in her direction. I realized that the reflection in the acrylic, or whatever the hell it was, allowed me to see my partner's face as he aimed the gun. More specifically, I was able to look down the barrel of his gun. I wasn't the best pool player in the world, but I knew how the hell to make a bank shot. It felt like I was about to be shot, both literally and even more literally. With no time for rational thought, I swung the bag of money in front of my head. The bag jerked in my hand just as Clyde, an allusion to Bonnie and Clyde, the bank robbers, discharged another round. Suddenly a plume of red liquid burst from the hole made by the flying bullet upon impact with the bag I was using, again, literally, to save face. I dodged the bullet, again, literally. The paint couldn't have flown truer if I had been able to aim. My big road comrade was quickly covered in red ink from his bloody head to the middle of his chest. Fortunately, not a single drop of ink touched me or my clothes. He wiped the blood and ink from his eyes while waving his weapon in my direction. That's when I decided it was time to leave. The passenger window of his Explorer was shattered by another bullet as I made my way out the door. I turned left and switched to sprinting through the wooded area as cars with sirens blaring drove into the parking lot. Fortunately, there was a path through the woods and I was able to maintain a brisk pace. After running what I estimated to be 3 miles through the woods, I came to a clearing on a hill. I stopped to assess the situation and also to determine if any bloodhounds were barking on my trail. Immediately, I saw the very park I was walking through when I was kidnapped by this Dillinger, bank robber again. I was thankful that a few years ago I started running 5 miles 3 times a week to lose weight and get in shape. Last spring, I even placed third in a 10K race in Blandon. I wasn't even out of breath thinking about my situation. My truck was about a half-mile from my spot. I watched to see if the police had spotted my truck. After a few minutes, I was sure there were no people in the park. Near an old ash tree, I saw what looked like a gopher hole. I took off the lab coat I had been wearing during the robbery and stuffed it into the burrow. Then I shoved my hat in there and kicked up enough dirt that it covered the clothes. The dark glasses I threw into the hollow of a tree 100 yards from the park. At this point, I realized I was still clinging to the money bag. The ink on it had dried. I put the bag on the ground and opened it with a long stick. Nothing happened. Then I hit it several times with the same stick. Again, no red ink appeared. It seems that the cashiers had slipped only one load of ink along with the money. The ricocheted bullet caused the die pack to explode. It appeared that a few strips of bills were riddled with ink, but most of them gave little indication that they had been stolen in a daring bank robbery. A closer look revealed that 2 groups of ones and 1 group of fives were practically worthless, but the larger bills remained unmarked in red ink. I collected the 3 damaged bundles and placed them in the hollow of a tree with dark panes. I was quite nervous as I approached my truck. I was almost expecting a dozen police cars to screech to a halt, police officers to jump out of them and order me to put my hands in the air. But nothing happened. I started my truck and drove in the opposite direction of the bank. It was several hours before I could relax. It seemed like I had gotten away with the bank robbery. My accomplice didn't know my name, so he couldn't report me. The most he could do was describe me to the cops. I've seen enough of these drawings to know that there's almost no chance of being identified that way. The bank cameras would simply show a man in a lab coat, a big hat, and dark glasses. It would have been hard to even determine my gender under that disguise. I didn't touch anything without gloves, so there would be no fingerprints. I was pretty sure I knew the next step. The cops would be waiting for the money to show up. It seemed unlikely to me that they would have serial numbers unless they had a packet with serial numbers written down, already stocked in case of a robbery. I didn't need the money, and it looked like there were only a few $1,000s in the bag. You'd have to be crazy to spend it and risk getting caught. An hour later, I came across a construction site. 2 lanes of cars lined up in a row waiting for a backhoe to cross the road a few feet in front of them. Glancing in the mirror, I saw that there were no cars behind me. I pulled up next to a brand-new Chevy Silverado with a club cab and Texas license plates. The trunk was stuffed with 2 bikes, a kayak, coolers, and other outdoor gear. I grabbed my money bag from my seat and tossed it into the back of the truck. All eyes were on the huge car crossing the highway, and no one noticed the money flowing from my truck into his. I pulled off the highway at the next exit and took secondary roads. Eventually, I threw the latex gloves off a bridge into a small river. By this time, it was getting dark, and I stopped at the next town. By this time, I was in western South Carolina. I ate some fried pickles and a pulled pork sandwich before stopping at a local motel. Slept soundly for 10 hours. The next morning, I decided to read my email and also check Google for recent bank robberies. I got a short message from Dennis saying that neither my wife nor daughter had tried to call me at work. The whole town was talking about a murder. The rumor was that the cops were looking for me because I had killed Mary's lover and was a fugitive from justice. Interestingly, several other married men were listed as likely suspects in the murder. It seems Barry Lassiter had quite a few married women in his clip, or so the rumor mill only claimed. Dennis also told me that about the same time I left, there had been a bank robbery in town. He said one man was injured and the guy got away with an undetermined amount of cash. I then typed bank robberies into Googling and found that my bank was at the top of the list, followed closely by a house robbery in Blandon. I had finally reached the peak of search engine optimization on Google, and my name and business weren't even mentioned. Turns out a certain Billy Bob Jenkins suffered brain damage when he accidentally shot himself in the head while trying to bag a cashier with nice breasts. That's not exactly what the article said, but I was there so I knew how it really went down. He then tried to shoot the second cashier, the one with the beautiful smile, but the bullet ricocheted into the bag of money the second perp was holding. This caused the die packet to explode in such a way that Billy Bob was splattered with living shit. Enraged, suffering from acute lead poisoning and blurred vision, Billy Bob attempted to shoot his partner, who prudently fled through the bank door. He managed to shoot through the passenger window of his own car, but apparently missed his target. Police were combing the wooded area behind the bank looking for the second fugitive. He was last seen walking, so state and local police were confident he would soon be apprehended. Billy Bob fell into a coma after brain surgery due to a bullet lodged in his head. He was unable to provide police with any information about his accomplice. The updated and linked article described how police were able to trace the stolen bank money all the way back to the congressman's family from Texas. They were on vacation and stopped to tour the Biltmore estate in Asheville, North Carolina. While Congressman Johnson and his wife were touring the famous structure, their two teenage boys were in the gift stores, spending bank money like drunken sailors after disembarking in port. Congressman Johnson denied knowing about the money or where it came from. The kids claimed they found it in the truck. After questioning, both teens admitted that there was more cash in their suitcase. $7,348 were found, slightly stained with paint. Police have yet to determine if Congressman Johnson, his wife, or one of his sons was the second bank robber. The family has been detained for questioning. That answered my question about the bank having a list of at least some of the serial numbers of the stolen bills. I was able to save my ass and cause trouble for a politician at the same time. It was a great stroke of luck. I decided to explore the hills of South Carolina for a few days. I needed to lay low and stay out of trouble. I could only imagine how quickly I would be arrested for killing my wife's lover when my ass was already practically in jail for armed robbery. There were plenty of quaint towns and tourist spots to see if you took your time and opened your eyes. A couple days later, I was driving down a dirt road and came across an old pickup truck stopped on the side of the road. There were two women standing in front of it. They lifted the hood but didn't seem to understand what the problem was. I parked in front of them and walked back to offer a helping hand. The two women looked enough alike that I could determine they were probably sisters in their mid to late 30s. I introduced myself and offered my services. They looked at each other and nodded, then turned to me. "You're so kind," said the blonde, the sister with the thicker figure. "I'm Libby, and this is my sister Abby." "Our truck stalled here, and we couldn't get it started," added Abby, who was darker and a little easier on the eyes than her sister. I looked under the hood and saw that the battery terminal was badly corroded. I was about to scrape the debris off the terminal when the cable broke. "I think that might be the problem," I said, pointing to the battery. "I have some cables and tools in my truck. I own a parts store up north. I change batteries all the time. Repairing and replacing cables is something I do quite often." "That would be great!" Libby exclaimed, snuggling into my arm to get a better look at the problem. Her breasts were surprisingly full and firm. It took me about a half hour, but as soon as I replaced the cable and cleaned the battery terminals, the truck started right up. The sisters were thrilled with my help. Libby took a thermos out of the cooler in the back of the truck and poured some liquid into a plastic cup. She held it out to me. "Have some unsweetened tea. We make it ourselves. It's our way of saying thanks for your help, unless you're interested in something more personal," Abby offered. The two ladies seemed nice enough, but I hadn't been with a woman other than Mary in about 20 years. If I was going to get off, it would take something more enticing than two sisters in the same bed with me. "Thank you, but tea will be more than enough," I replied, taking a sip of the strange-tasting liquid. I emptied the cup and handed it back to Abby. At that moment, I noticed that both women were looking at me expectantly. I was slowly coming to my senses. I was lying on my back on something soft that looked like a bed. At first, I thought I was in the sea, as everything around me was rocking. As my mind began to clear, I realized that the rocking was caused by a naked Abby riding me. Her amazingly large breasts were bouncing back and forth less than a foot from my face. Being the kind of guy I am, that is straight, I decided to give her melons a little squeeze. That's when I discovered my wrists were handcuffed to the bed. "What is going on?" I wheezed after several failed attempts to speak. My throat was dry. "I'm repaying your kindness this afternoon," replied a smiling Abby. "Just lie back and enjoy the ride." My mind began to clear. I pondered the unusual circumstances. It seems my alter ego had awakened long before me and had taken great pleasure in sinking into Abby's molten core. I had good sex with my wife, but nothing like this. "That was impressive," Abby praised, getting off me and laying on her back next to me. "I bet I'm already pregnant." I was just coming to my senses when Abby made that statement of hers. Was she trying to get pregnant? Was I expected to be the father of her child? How many women would want a man they had just met to impregnate them? Then I realized there were at least two such women. Libby grabbed little Bill and stroked him enthusiastically. I realized that I was being raped. These women had apparently drugged me, tied me up, and were now having me. I was being used with absolutely no regard for my feelings and emotions. As that thought crossed my mind, Libby's bust touched my chin. "Oh, Bill likes my breasts," Libby gasped. "I bet he's going to knock me up, too. I was still a little horny, but it got my attention. Ladies, I'm a married man. I don't want any more kids. I'm too old for this shit, and my wife will never understand me. Please don't expect me to be the father of your children. It's hard enough for me to take care of one." "Don't worry, Bill. We don't expect you to contribute anything," replied Abby. "We are both at an age where we need to have children or give up the idea," Libby added. "We agreed that you would be the perfect donor. You'll only take this active part in the children's lives." "Why did you drug me? Why am I tied up?" I felt these were reasonable questions. "We weren't sure we could convince you to mate with us. You seem like a responsible guy. Getting two cute little girls pregnant and moving on is probably out of your comfort zone," Libby explained. My mind was working and red flags were going up all over the place. These sisters drugged me and then tied me to the bed. They seemed to genuinely want to get me pregnant, but their methods were extreme. I had a bad feeling about their ultimate goal. "No need to drug me or tie me to the bed. I'll fuck both of your asses all day and night if you'll only feed me when I impregnate Libby's garden," I promised. "You're not just saying that so we can free your hands, are you?" Libby asked. "You're not going to trick us, are you?" "You'd have to be crazy to turn down such a sweet deal," I said. "That's great, but I'd enjoy it a lot more if I could play with your breasts and run my hands over your smooth, round buttocks. I think you'd like that, too." "Okay, as soon as I get your injection, we'll get you something to eat," Libby promised, increasing the pace of her gallop. It was the second time in 10 minutes. The ladies untied me and led me into the kitchen. The house looked pretty normal, considering there were two crazy bitches living there. I sat down at the table while the women bustled around preparing food. Libby put a cold beer next to a dish of lasagna that Abby put in front of me. Abby then pulled a bottle from the cupboard and retrieved a pill, which she placed next to my plate. Seeing the confusion in my eyes, she explained, "This is another Viagra. The last one worked so well we decided to give you another one. Finish your dinner and get an hour or two of sleep. Then we'll expect you to fulfill your promise and fuck us some more." That seemed reasonable, so I popped the blue pill, washing it down with beer. The next 3 days passed like a blur for me. I suspect I may have overdosed on Viagra, but I certainly wasn't going to complain. I spent almost all of my time in bed, serving my sisters, or resting to recuperate for another round. By the end of the third day, all three of us recognized that we'd had enough. That night, we slept in the big bed without any overt sexual activity. "We had a great time," Abby declared as she kissed me goodbye. "Please don't ever try to visit your kids. We'll probably think you'll try to prove paternity or something and take them away. I just know we'll react badly." I nodded, mulling over her not-so-veiled threat. "Don't worry about that. You'll never see me again. I won't call, I won't write, and I certainly won't be staying here again. I'll have to settle for wonderful memories of two of the most beautiful and sexiest sisters on the planet." Libby wrapped her arms around me and kissed me deeply. "Thank you so much for giving us so much pleasure, as well as children. We're going to be wonderful mothers, so don't worry about your babies." "I'm not worried about them at all," I stated emphatically as I climbed into my truck. "I'll never forget you ladies. Thanks for the memories and good luck in your future endeavors. You'll never see me again, but I bet you'll think of me from time to time." I didn't slow down until I crossed the Georgia border. I stopped at a fast food place with Wi-Fi and got online for the first time in almost a week. I had no idea I was in for so many surprises. It turned out that the FBI had opened an investigation into Congressman Johnson's financial affairs. They discovered that he was accepting cash to allow Mexican drug mules to enter the United States through his land. He even had a driver who would transport them from a location near the border to a small town where they would meet with their bosses. The article stated that Johnson was in the process of turning over his business associates. It seemed that more than a few of them had power and influence in Texas and Washington. The shit hit the fan. I never saw this development coming. In another story, Billy Bob Jenkins was labeled a serial bank robber. He was the prime suspect in 8 bank robberies in 5 states, including one in my hometown of Blandon. During his robbery, he shot and wounded 2 bank tellers and a sheriff's deputy in North Carolina. By the way, he passed away from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. I checked my email and saw that my brother, wife, and daughter had been trying to contact me for the past 2 days. I called Dennis to check the email he had sent me. "Your vacation is over. They caught the guy who killed that bastard Lassiter. You're not gonna believe this, but it was that sorry-ass Detective Sampson. He did everything he could to make it look like you or Tim Robbins killed Lassiter." "Why was he trying to drag Tim Robbins into this?" I asked in confusion. "He's a good guy. We bowl with him in our league. Lassiter had your wife and Lisa Robbins and Detective Sampson's wife. The guy was getting top-notch married pussy. No offense," Dennis added. "No offense taken," I assured my brother. "How did Sampson get caught?" "The day you left town, the National Bank was robbed and one of the customers was shot and wounded. The FBI seized videotapes from the bank. They reviewed a few days ago to see if they could find the perpetrator who was watching the bank. One of the videotapes showed Sampson entering and 15 minutes later leaving the building where Lassiter lived. It was across the street from the bank and a little further down the street." "Holy shit?" I asked, pondering the likelihood of this happening. "Did they catch the bank robber?" "Not here, but he robbed another bank a day or so later. It was down south. The dumb bastard tried to shoot the teller, but the bullet bounced off the acrylic glass security screen and hit him in the head. The guy died a couple days ago." "Wow. Looks like you had a lot of anxiety while I was gone," I replied, remembering Billy Bob's last hurrah. "That's not all," Dennis replied. "I don't know if you've heard, but Congressman Johnson of Texas is in deep political and legal shit. Turns out he and Mayor Smith were roommates in college and have been friends ever since. Smith was going to run for Congress next year, but Johnson snitched to the feds about Smith being involved in some drug smuggling with him. Smith was looking at a long stretch up the river, prison." My head was spinning when I finished talking to my brother. I had heard of unintended consequences, but I had never heard of anything like this. I decided to just delete the emails from my wife and daughter. It was time to go home and start the divorce. 2 days later, I walked into my house and saw Mary cooking dinner. She looked at me and burst into tears. "Daddy, we've been trying to call you for days!" exclaimed my 16-year-old daughter Cindy, running up to me and hugging me. "Was that before or after you put a restraining order on me?" I asked, trying to keep from hugging Cindy back. "There was no restraining order. This Detective Sampson showed up one morning and told Mom he knew she was sleeping with that jerk Lassiter. He took our phones and computers. He said we couldn't contact you because you were wanted for Lassiter's murder. They were supposed to find and arrest you, and he didn't want us to warn you. My mom and I told him he was crazy. You would never kill someone even if Mom stumbled, but he said he had all kinds of evidence. You weren't coming home, so it looked like you were running from the law, just like he said," my daughter reasoned. It wasn't until after the bank robbery and Sampson's arrest that we learned the truth. Uncle Dennis finally told us that Sampson had interrogated you. That bastard told us that your mom and I were afraid of you. He's a murderer and a liar, Dad. We weren't afraid. We know you love us and would never hurt us," Cindy concluded. "What about your mother and that asshole Lassiter? You just told me she was sleeping with that guy before he was killed," I pointed out. "You need to talk to your mom about that," Cindy replied with tears in her eyes. "Please listen to her, Dad. She loves you more than anything in the world. Don't let this ruin the best thing you ever had." "Mom, I'm gonna finish making dinner. You need to talk to Daddy alone. Tell him what you told me." "He'll understand," Cindy insisted, her gaze seeming to challenge me. Mary walked dejectedly to our bedroom and closed the door as soon as I followed her inside. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked at me. "Bill, I slept with Barry Lassiter. I'm so sorry about that. Please forgive me." "You think it's so simple? You had an affair for a few months and then you just apologized? Does that make everything orderly?" "I don't think so," I replied with some anger. "Months? It was one time. It was at Sue Kane's Friday night retirement party. I'd had too much to drink. It was wrong, but that's no excuse. Barry offered to help me home, but he took me to his place. He practically carried me to his apartment and possessed me. I woke up an hour later to him sleeping naked next to me. I didn't even know where I was, Mary stated between sobs. I got dressed and left. I called a cab to take me home. Remember when I told you I had too much to drink and didn't want to go home? You drove me back for the car the next day, Mary concluded. Why didn't you tell me he did it? I demanded an answer. I would have torn that bastard apart and fed him to the fucking fish. I knew it. I realized I had to tell you, but I was hoping to find a time when Barry wasn't around. I was afraid you'd kill him and end up in jail. I can understand you leaving me, but I'd never forgive myself if my stupid actions landed you in jail. You're a good man, Bill. You deserve better. I won't fight you if you want a divorce. The events of the last 10 days raced through my mind as I looked at my crying wife. She was clearly devastated. I left the house thinking she didn't believe in me, but did I have enough faith myself? I believed Samson when he told me that Mary and Cindy had asked for a restraining order and were afraid of me. I should have known them better. I thought of Detective Samson caught on the surveillance cameras at the bank and the fact that I blindly accused Congressman Johnson and led to his downfall. I indirectly flushed Mayor Smith's career down the toilet as well and led to his imprisonment. I even managed to participate in an armed bank robbery. Finally, I fondly remembered having 2 ovulating sisters continuously for several days. I did all this while Mary apologized to me for ending up in a rapist's bed. I thought about how hard it was for her to admit that to me, and also how concerned she was for my well-being. I was the only one with a few good reasons to apologize. Mary watched me while I mulled over her confession. If she hadn't had too much to drink and she hadn't been carried to Lassiter's bed, none of what I'd experienced over the past 10 days would have happened. Detective Sampson would never have visited me at work. If I hadn't left town that day, Billy Bob might still be robbing banks and shooting people. Congressman Johnson might still be bringing drugs into the country while making important government decisions. Mayor Smith could have launched his campaign for Congress, funded by drug money and his unholy partnership with Johnson. Billy Bob still managed to accomplish something good through his violent nature. Detective Sampson was identified in a videotape from the bank. That prevented him from finding a scapegoat to blame for the murder he committed with his own hand. I would never spend 3 days screwing the asses of 2 semi-attractive sisters. I made a decision. I knew the right thing to do, but I also knew that sometimes things go more smoothly when you do the wrong thing for the right reasons. Tell Mary about Billy Bob, Congressman Johnson, Mayor Smith, Detective Sampson, and my 3 days with Abby and Libby. It wouldn't do any good. At least I haven't seen any positive purpose. Mary, if I'm still with you, I'll love you forever, I said quietly. She was in my arms and hugged me as tightly as she could. I realized how good it felt to have her body pressed against mine. She was my love, my girl forever. I carried her in my arms to the kitchen. She laughed and kissed my face repeatedly. Good for you, Daddy. You did the right thing. I knew you would. You and Mom love each other too much to let anything come between you, Cindy argued. Is there any chance I'll have a brother or sister as a result of this adventure? I thought briefly about Abby and Libby and how much they wanted children. Even so, I realized that Cindy wasn't going to have any brothers or sisters. I'm sorry, Cindy. You won't have siblings, Mary replied. I've explained all this to you before. When I was pregnant with you, I had complications. The doctor was worried that another pregnancy could have very serious consequences, so right after you were born, your father had a vasectomy. He's only been shooting blanks ever since.